Hey, it's Bill Russell. I'm here in my yellow hat. I wore it at Vive and Hims to signify our partnership with Alex's Lemonade Stand Foundation and the search for cures and to combat childhood cancer. I'm just blown away by the generosity of our community. With the help of our partners, Short Test, Rackspace, CTG, and some of you giving individually, we were able to raise close to $40,000 at those two events. It is just exceptional. And I would like to thank all of you who have joined us in this cause. If you would like to be a part of it as well, go ahead and hit our page, thisweekhealth.com. You can go to the top blue banner that is on our homepage and click on that to give today. Thank you again for being a part of this effort and this cause. Today in Health IT, I'm going to start you down a path of your business impact analysis, which I think may be sorely lacking in our industry. We'll talk about it. My name is Bill Russell. I'm a former CIO for a 16-hospital system and creator of This Week Health, a set of channels and events dedicated to transform healthcare one connection at a time. We want to thank our show sponsors who are investing in developing the next generation of health leaders: Short Test, Artisight, Enterprise Health, Parlance, Certify Health, Notable, and ServiceNow. Check them out at thisweekhealth.com/today. Hey, we really want to thank CTG and Short Test, two great partners who came alongside of us with us on Captain's Campaign for Cures at the Vive event. And we were able to raise, I think, $11,400, $11,500, somewhere around that. It was a little over $11,000. And we are so excited to be able to do that. And we appreciate every dollar and everybody who participated in the pictures, getting your picture taken with Captain. It all goes a long way, and we hope to end pediatric cancer in our lifetime. If you want to give today, go ahead, hit our website. At the top now, we have a banner. Just click on that banner to give today. All right, one last thing. I'm going to keep pushing this mentoring thing. Share this podcast with a friend or colleague. Use it as a foundation for daily or weekly discussions on the topics that are relevant to you in the industry. Agree with me, disagree with me. That's not the point. The point is have the conversation with another person and mentor them along the way. They can subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. All right, here we go. I'm fairly new to healthcare. Now, with that being said, I'm coming up on my 10-year anniversary, but most of my career was outside of healthcare, and my first job was as CIO for St. Joe's 16-hospital system in Southern California. But prior to that, I did a ton of consulting. And I used to tell people beer, banks, and bombs. Anheuser-Busch was one of my clients that I worked with a bunch. A ton of banks. Just a ton of banks. And then McDonnell Douglas was another. I lived in St. Louis, so those were some of the main headquarters, Monsanto and others that I did work for. The banks are interesting to me because the banks really do a good job with this whole idea of business continuity management and business impact analysis. And I did a bunch of work with MasterCard. And I didn't actually do the work I'm going to talk about today, but I met with the team that did it. And eventually I hired the guy who put their program together and had him doing this kind of work for other organizations around the country because it was so good. And so what we're going to do today is, if your board brought me in today and said, hey, we want to get an idea how we stand with regard to business continuity, I'd follow this path and I would start asking these questions. And so I'm going to give you a little heads up. Your board may hire me. Somebody from your board might be listening to this show and they'll say, you know what, we should bring Bill in. He's done this before, and he's going to take our security team, our IT team, and our business team through this process to identify if we are ready for the things like Change Healthcare. And for those of you who say this was unforeseen or it was impossible to predict or whatever, you're just wrong. Because quite frankly, clearly it is a system that is a tier 1 type level system because of the supply chain, the IT supply chain, the data that's being used by your entire health system to generate bills, to write prescriptions and all that other stuff comes through Change. Therefore, it should be classified as tier 1, whether it's on-site or not on-site. We'll get to that in a minute. Okay, essentially, this was given to me a long time ago. I wish I could give it credit. I think it's a financial, gosh, I'm going to get it wrong, but it's a government agency. It's a financial assessment kind of thing from the government, and they publish this. Think of this like the NIST framework for this. and they have 10 steps. First is oversee and implement resilience, continuity, and response capabilities. So you have to have buy-in, you know where you're going, you know what you're trying to do, and what the objectives are. And then number two, and these are like the precursor to it. Number two is align the business continuity management elements with strategic goals and objectives of your organization. And as healthcare, it's a lot of it's just basic stuff. Continuity of care, the ability to deliver in a state of an emergency. And a lot of us have those like really truly DR things around our data center, and actually I think less and less on the cloud stuff, because every time there's a cloud outage, it seems like it's really impacting us. We probably need to go back and relook at all of this stuff, quite frankly. As we change architecture, you always have to put this plan in place. But the reality of these first two steps is you have to put a program in place. This is not a once and done kind of thing. This is a program, and everything keeps coming through there. New applications come in, they should go through your security. They should also go through your business continuity management cycle. So we get to number three pretty quickly, which is, hey, you set up the program, you got the right people on board, you have the governance around it and all that stuff. Number three, develop a business impact analysis to identify critical functions, analyze interdependencies, and assess impacts. This was one of my favorite projects. And I did this when I went into St. Joe's. I brought somebody in to help us do this. And essentially, you identify all your applications, which is a fun thing to do in healthcare in and of itself. And then you start to identify the interdependencies of all those systems. And this is where you tier your applications, tier 1, 2, and 3. Tier 1 can't live without. Tier 2, you can live without for a short period of time, but you need them back as quickly as possible. And then tier 3, you need to determine what's the impact to the business, how long can you live without it. Quite frankly, if they're below tier 3, you shouldn't have them. Get rid of them. They are probably not necessary to your business. And that's just part of your application rationalization. I think this is one of the reasons so many people are taking a platform-centric approach to architecture, because it simplifies this whole process, except it puts a lot of dependency on individual systems, and they become hypercritical to your environment. And then you have to really think through, if everything's in the cloud, what does that look like? Does the cloud provider have the redundancy that you need? Do you have the ability, what's your network look like? And I find a lot of network architecture is antiquated today as well. Regardless, develop the business impact analysis. This is a fun process. It can be a fun process to find all the applications and then talk through what they do, where they get their data, how that data is utilized, what it passes it on to next, are there critical functions that are attached to this, and analyze all the interdependencies. Again, this takes a fair amount of time. It's not an overnight kind of thing. Generally speaking, it's a team, and you have to make sure that the team has access to all the application owners and able to access tools and whatnot to identify applications that your team may not even recognize are out there. Let's get to number 4. Conduct a risk assessment to identify risks and evaluate likelihood and impact of disruptions. This is where you're looking at what are the risks associated with potentially your geography. There's geographic risks. I was in Southern California. Geographic risks are pretty obvious. There's either a fire, a flood, or an earthquake on any given week. It's one of the reasons we were moving our data centers out of Southern California. We moved them to Las Vegas. Do you know what the biggest risk in Las Vegas is, according to the continuity and risk people? There's two, actually. The primary one is that from time to time, there are train cars that travel near Vegas with elements that you don't want traveling near your data center. Let's just say it that way. And then the second thing is, if there's a disaster in California, there's going to be a flood of people heading towards Las Vegas. And that's the second risk. When I heard that, I thought, that's interesting, but that's a risk, right? Those people are going to be coming over. They're going to be out of their homes. They're going to be looking for places to stay. They're going to need water. They're going to need food, so forth. So anyway, you have to do that risk assessment. Identify the risks that are relevant to your organization. Number 5, develop effective strategies to meet resilience and recovery objectives. So as you identify your tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 apps, you have to start putting plans in place for each one of those things, including, I keep coming back to this concept of supply chain, including the data supply chain. You have to understand what data is feeding what systems and where that data is coming from. Because if you have an upstream system like change that goes down, it renders a lot of other systems useless. So you have to understand that data supply chain. I would create a chart that is a data supply chain. I didn't back then, but I would today. Knowing what I know today and having lived through some things I've lived through, I would definitely do that. The other thing I would absolutely do is a cloud assessment in terms of our connectivity to the internet and the cloud and how we get there. To give you an idea of how far we went with it, we actually contracted with a third party that looked at all of our systems, because as some of the carriers run across the same lines. And so what we were able to do with this third party is they were able to identify which of our lines, even though we thought we were using two carriers, were essentially running across the same fiber. Because if that fiber gets cut, both of your carriers are down. And we identified, I think, about 5 of those in our 16 hospital system, plus clinics and other things. Anyway, worth knowing that a single backhoe can take out your entire hospital. Number 6, establish a business continuity plan that includes incident response, disaster recovery, and crisis emergency management. I would hope you have, and you probably do have elements of this. It just needs to be looked at every now and then. It's a consistent process. This is why you need to have a business continuity governance and plan in place, and it's constantly being worked on and looked at. Number 7, implement a business continuity training program for personnel and other stakeholders. It does you no good if systems go down and the people don't know what they're supposed to do when they're supposed to do it. This is where tabletop exercises come in. It's so funny. Every time we did a tabletop exercise, I got killed or I got moved out of the room because they didn't want me in the room because I had a lot of answers, because I was also I was a former CTO, so I understood the architecture and things. I could also still work on our routers and stuff like that. They invariably took me out of the room, and then other people had to answer questions. And you have to take that same thing into account. Some of your people might get hurt in a disaster and those kind of things. But that's not the disaster I'm talking about today. This is just knowing your systems, knowing them well, knowing where they are, knowing what they serve and who they serve, and understanding the inputs to that system and the outputs from that system. That's what I'm talking about today. The real big disasters I think people have a handle on, they should have a handle on today, especially if you're in a hospital. And so I think the big things have been taken care of. I think it's the small things that we have overlooked. Number 8, conduct exercises, tests, verify that procedures support established objectives. One of the most impressive organizations I ever saw would fail over from one data center to the other. I think it was every 3 months. And so they could work on the one data center while the other one was down. Clearly, this is really expensive. But regardless, they were able to fail back and forth between the 2 data centers. And they would run off of one, fix up the other one, and then they would go back and forth. Now, we would do that in the cloud today, but regardless, that's a pretty effective thing. If you can run on your DR platform for a period of time for, say, 3 months, you have proven that it'll work. And by the way, you should run on it for not just overnight. Oh, it worked. We were able to fail over, fail back. You should run on it for a while and see if the latency is really going to work in your environment, and see if you need to re-architect those cloud environments that you think are going to serve you in the case of a disaster, which may not. And number 9, review and update the business continuity program to reflect the current environment. This is why you need a program, constantly looking at it. Have we changed? What's changed? And they're constantly looking at inputs, everything that's coming into your system, and they're looking at it from a continuity standpoint. Program. It doesn't have to be a huge team, and it doesn't have to be a sole responsibility, but you should have a program in place where people are looking at, oh my gosh, we just brought in 10 new applications, or we're bringing in a new EHR, or we're bringing in a new ERP. Have we looked at all the data inputs and whatever? So anyway, these are the people who are asking the questions and making you aware. And since I'm getting close to the end, number 10, monitor and report business continuity and resilience activities. Hopefully your cybersecurity, your governance, I don't know, whatever that subgroup or subcommittee of the board is asking for such things. If they weren't 2 weeks ago, they probably are now. And if you're stuck here, this is an important thing to get right. Absolutely. Talk about the three things that a CIO must do. It's keep the trains running on time, and that's the core systems, right? Cybersecurity, your data center, your business continuity. Just keep the systems running. Those are the kind of things you get fired for, like those things. If you haven't built up a lot of collateral and if you haven't built up a lot of institutional credit for doing good work, you can get fired for those things fairly easily. The second thing is you have to incrementally improve, and I call that laying new track. So keep the trains running on time, laying new track, new features, new functions, have to have that capability. And then the third thing is to build airplanes. That is innovate. And it's not just the job of the innovators to innovate, it's your job as a CIO to innovate. And this falls into that category of keep the trains running on time. Never lose sight of keeping the trains running on time. It is so important. It is the core of the CIO job, no matter what really cool things they have you working on. All right, that's all for today. Don't forget, share this podcast with a friend or colleague, mentor someone, and keep the conversation going. We want to thank our channel sponsors who are investing in our mission to develop the next generation of health leaders: SureTest, Artisight, Enterprise Health, Parlance, Certify Health, Notable, and ServiceNow. Check them out at thisweekhealth.com/today. Thanks for listening. That's all for now.